Well, hello. It's Michael back with another video from the Spiritually Awakened Man channel. And thanks for joining me. This video today is about the shift. Now, maybe you've heard about the shift. Maybe you're a shift expert. Maybe you can go very deeply in these areas. But I'm really speaking today to people that really don't fully understand the shift and don't understand if maybe they're in it, have already been through it, or what have you. So I thought I would spend a little bit of time doing a video on the shift. The shift, what is it? It's hard to describe, but it's a point in time where you change your perspectives. And it has a lot to do with, going down a certain pathway and looking at the world as you go through a spiritual awakening. And there's a moment when you can feel your perspective has really changed. They call it going from ambition in your life to meaning. And it has a lot to do with going from ego to service to self versus service to others. And, to find fulfillment in your life. It's that point when you realize it's time to change. Even though you're aware of a lot of other things, you're aware that the world isn't what it has been portrayed as. And you're starting to see more and more and more about it. And you're starting to realize that you've been played in a lot of ways and you've fallen into the trap, like we all have, of being programmed into what you should be, where you should be at a certain point in your life, how you should run your life, what success in life is defined as. It's time for you to define your own success. And that's where you get to the point where you realize you're done with this other stuff. You're going to define your success in life a different way. And they just have called this the shift. And there's some commonality to it. Somebody who's really into the shift that I respect very much, he's passed away years ago, but his name is Wayne Dyer, Dr. Wayne Dyer. If you don't know who he is, you will at some point, and most of you probably have run into some of his writings or at least his name and hit him up on some of his YouTube videos as well. He has a really beautiful way of describing these things, and he actually describes how he went through his shift, and it had to do with him being a very successful author. He was a psychiatrist, and he was a university professor. And he started to write books, and he became very, very successful author. But it was all about ego. What's his next book? And how high will it climb on the bestseller list? And how many copies can he sell? And how many interviews can he do? And how much money will he and the publishers make? And all these different things. And he realized, at a point in time where he was very much egoic in his pursuits of achievement. And the books he was writing, they weren't really about spiritual awakening or spirituality. They were about other things, but similar, I would say, in some ways. But he hadn't really made the transition over. And he had an experience with his family that where he fully exhibited his ego in a restaurant. And that night, he woke up 4 o'clock in the morning and realized that he was doing everything for himself, and everything was through his egoic perspective, and it wasn't about what would be the best thing for others around him. In that case, his family. And it's a pretty interesting story, but that was his shift. As an example. My shift came when, at my last job, I had been there for several years, not that long, 4 years. I had done everything I could do for them. I was running sales for them, and I had reached a plateau in many different areas, and I just didn't have any more levers to turn, no more knobs to turn. They were just at a point where I couldn't do anything more for them. And my boss came to me and said, so we've done everything. We've looked at everything we can look at. We've made the changes. There's just nothing else we can do at this moment. What do you want to do? And I just said, without planning this at all, I said, I think there's bigger things for me to do in life. And he said, I think you're right. I think we should probably wrap things up for you. And then I left. And so that ties into the next thing I want to talk about here, which is something that happens for everybody when they're going through the shift. And it's referred to as the quantum moment. And there's four descriptors to that quantum moment. It's got to be vivid, i.e. something that you remember very well. It's got to be a surprise. It's got to be benevolent, meaning something that feels good to you, feels right. And it needs to be enduring. And so I think in my situation, it was vivid. I will never forget that moment when I said what I needed to say and realized this is the shift time for me. It was a surprise. I didn't plan it. It was benevolent because it felt very good. A weight was lifted off my shoulders, and it's been enduring. It was nearly 3 years ago. So that was it. It's kind of a divine moment, like it's something that's been planned for a long time, and I didn't really have a lot of say about it. It just happened. And that was the awakening shift moment for me, the quantum moment. So one question that's come up, and as you know, the channel, The Spiritual Awakened Man, is about where we can delving into areas of spiritual awakening that we can view them the way men process these things. As many of you know, I started noticing that there were more women involved in the spiritual awakening programs that I was participating in, and so forth, different communities and things, and fewer men. And I started wondering why that is. And I thought, well, I'll build this channel and try and draw as many men in as I can so that we can, as a collective group in a community, we can share our thoughts and comments and perspectives on how we're processing these different aspects of a spiritual awakening. Maybe we can learn something. Maybe we can learn something that we can use to draw other men into their spiritual awakening. They're trying to go through it. They just push it off for a lot of reasons, I think, and just don't want to address it. I think these are things that society has kind of ingrained in us, ego-related things about how men should conduct themselves and the things that should be interesting to them in life. And I think for these reasons, fewer men let go and surrender to a spiritual awakening. So we're trying to explore that. Women are welcome, absolutely, because I think learning more about how their men are processing what's trying to happen to them, which is a spiritual awakening. And if they understand how men process, maybe they can better understand them, but also help them. So is the shift different for men and women? Interestingly enough, I was listening to something on YouTube with Dyer recently. And data on how men and women process spiritually awakening topics is not readily available. It's hard to find. But Dr. Dyer was talking about a study that he had seen that came up. And the video is 10 years old. Wayne passed away several years ago, maybe 5 or something like that, I'm going to guess. So this is some data that's a little dated, but it was interesting data, and I wanted to share it. So regarding the shift, and they were specifically talking about the shift, what were the 5 top priorities in men's lives and the 5 top priorities in women's lives when they went through their shift, or before they went through their shift? And then I've got the after as well. So let's go through them. I have a little table here, and I can share. That's shared for you. And just as a summary, the before is mostly ego-oriented for men and women, and we'll see that. Not one of the categories, like not one of the before and afters is the same for either men or women. And only spirituality ends up being the same in the after comparison. The only thing in common that men and women have in the after comparison, and that neither had in their before, was spirituality. So let's look at it. Men's priorities are top 5: wealth, adventure, achievement, pleasure, and respect. Wealth ego-oriented. Adventure, I think it's ego-oriented to a great extent. Achievement, generally their profession, ego-oriented. Pleasure, the things that they can do in their time to make themselves happy, which is ego-oriented. And respect, that's ego-oriented. And by the way, ego-oriented is not bad. It's just what changes in a shift. Okay, so that's what we're focusing on. Women before, family, because they were raised to believe that their success, men are looking at the wealth in the family, and women are looking at the family, because that's how you define the success of a woman is the family that she's put together and raised, right? Sense of independence, not so much different than adventure, but it is different. Career, so that aligns with men's achievement, same third level of priority and very similar. Fitting in, how well are they accepted in their community? Ego-oriented. Attractiveness, and how they define respect. Men, you would say respect. Women, they get the respect through how attractive they believe they are. So let's quickly go through. Family, ego. Sense of independence, ego. Yes, I'm an independent woman. Okay, that's how I look at that. It's ego-oriented. Career, ego-oriented. Fitting in, ego-oriented. Attractiveness, like respect, ego-oriented. Okay. Then you go to after the shift. It's reported that men their number one priority is spirituality. Wow, big change. Number one, spirituality. Yet we find women are involved in spiritually awakening and spirituality related programs and content and communities and all that stuff. Yet men have their number one priority, spirituality, which is interesting. And that it doesn't reflect that way out in kind of the communities that we're participating in. Number two, personal peace. So first of all, spirituality, not ego-oriented. The antithesis of ego-oriented. Personal peace, not ego-oriented. Family, not ego-oriented. God's will, which really means what's your purpose? Not ego-oriented. Honesty, in this realm, we're talking about authenticity. Are you honest with yourself about who you are? And do you represent who you really are? Okay, that's really what they're talking about. Women afterwards is interesting. Personal growth comes from nowhere to number one. And I think personal growth today, again, this is a 10-year-old study. I think it's more aligned with spirituality and a spiritual awakening now than it was before, but it's separate in this particular case. Sense of self-esteem, not ego-oriented. Self-esteem is different. Spirituality, okay, we understand that, not ego-oriented. Happiness, not ego-oriented. Forgiveness, not ego-oriented. And the only two that align are spirituality with men and spirituality with women, neither one of them in either of the before categories. And I would tie in personal growth with spirituality today, the way the terms are evolving. Isn't that interesting? So there you go. There's some data. Maybe we can get lucky and find some additional data that's more current at some point, and I'll bring that to you. So then what? So we've established there's a difference between men define things before and women, but they're all ego oriented. And afterwards, none of the things are the same afterwards. And the only two things that kind of came out of nowhere that are the same are spirituality on both. Interesting, isn't it? So let's move on here. Then what? What happens after the shift? You're looking for finding meaning, purpose. You go from ambition to meaning, the way Dr. Wayne Dyer describes it. And generally speaking, when you look into this, you find that purpose is always found in service. So that's what we're going to be seeking more so after the shift, is more opportunities to be of service to others as opposed to being of service to self, which is all about the ego stuff that we just talked about. Finding meaning is not always pushing so hard. Again, laying off the ambition, but becoming the observer and enjoying the ride, enjoying the journey more. It's learning how to let things show up in your life and being patient. Lao Tzu, maybe you've heard of Lao Tzu. He was the founder of Taoism, actually, and a philosopher back in 500 BC, and he's well regarded and well thought of. He comes up with the rules for purpose of all things. And he says the 4 rules of purpose are: you must have reverence for life, sincerity, kindness, and supportiveness, which supportiveness really means service. You're supporting in terms of others. So there you go. We've covered what the shift is in my terms, which I didn't create. I pulled them from other things that I've seen that I believe are very, very much in line with what I believe. And I've shared some data points, which we were able to find. And we've talked about kind of where you go after you've had your shift a little bit. I think that's all we're going to cover in this right now. If you're looking for something really interesting to go watch, it's something you can find for free. It's in the movie section of YouTube, and it's called The Shift. And it's a movie that Wayne Dyer made, of all things, about the shift. It's a little bit like a Hallmark movie, but he's such a beautiful person in the way he conducts himself and the way he describes the shift and gives examples in this movie and the way he's put the movie together with different scenarios of different types of people like us. I think it's worth watching. It's really something to do. And if you're looking to do it with your significant other because you both look at things differently, maybe in terms of a shift in your spiritual awakening, might be something to do together. Well, that's all I've got for you right now. This has been the Spiritually Awakened Man channel, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Be well, and namaste.